really just decided with this one that it was just going to happen. If I had to call my brothers and sisters up again, cast them in it, that's what we were going to do. If I was going to shoot it on my iPhone, that's what we were going to do. And I was just like, this is happening. This movie's getting made. So that's the mentality that I went in with, talking to producers. This is happening. This is what I want. Would love to have you on board, but if not, have a nice day.
If you got something, let it rip.
I'm never going to do this again.
Everybody grapples with this idea that you're really a fraud.
Like, I'm alive.
And that's when it clicked with me. And I thought, these are not superheroes. These are just men that can do super things.
This is Matt Del Negro, and you are listening to the new stripped down 10,000 No's. All right, today I've got writer-director Shane Atkinson with me. He dropped in with our 10,000 No's Insiders Community, was very kind to do that, and today's episode is a portion of that conversation, minus the Q&A we did at the end for the members. 2 weeks ago, we had Kelly Roy, casting director of LaRoy, Texas. Today we've got writer-director Shane Atkinson, and then we're going to have our star, John Magaro. Definitely want you to check out this film. I'm trying to get eyes on it because it was just such a good experience being a part of it, but it's really a good film. I hope you check it out. April 12th will be in select theaters. It'll also be video on demand, so you can stream it. For now, I'm going to give you writer-director Shane Atkinson.
What we do here is go back.
LaRoy is his first feature, but that's kind of misleading as you're going to hear how he came to be. He's done a ton of stuff. This is just officially his first feature. He has a great cast. He had John Magaro, Steve Zahn, Dylan Baker. He literally swept at Deauville Film Festival, the Grand Jury Prize, the Critics Award, and the Audience Award. Shane, thank you for being here. Your story, what I like about it so much is it's just like a guy doing what he loves. I think your whole story is kind of how you really just kind of found this thing that you loved as a kid, and now you're just a grown-up who's still doing what he loved as a kid. And I love that aspect of it because it's so pure to me. What was the beginning, if you could trace it back, like the beginning of your writing and filmmaking life, where would that be?
Well, thanks for having me, first of all, and for the very generous introduction. Yeah, I think I just came from like a movie watching family. You know, we had a VCR as a kid, and my parents were just big. To this day, they're big movie people. They go to the movies more than anybody I know. And I was one of six. And especially when I was a kid, movies were cheap. I think it was just like a good way to like shut six kids up for a couple hours, just like put them in a movie theater. So I never really had ambitions to be a filmmaker. We just grew up around movies. My parents were very like broad in their taste. They weren't really cinephiles, I would say, but they would watch everything. We watched big Hollywood blockbusters. We'd go to art house movies. There was I think it was a Lars von Trier movie called Breaking the Waves that my mom took me to. Do you know that movie?
I do know that. I remember that was a big deal, like in the 90s when I was first acting, and it was a huge deal. And I remember going to see that because my acting teacher, Terry Schreiber, talked about it so much. Yeah.
So my mom took me to that when I was really little, not having any idea what it was about. And it's a very explicitly sexual film. So I remember we lasted about 5 minutes in that one before my mom snuck out into the lobby to read what it was about, and then came back and decided we weren't going to see that one. But we saw a lot of everything. And I've made movies with my friends, like a lot of kids do. I had 5 siblings, 2 brothers and 3 sisters. And so I would make little films with them and cast them. I could write for 5 different parts and just put them in the movies. So just really grew up just surrounded by it. And then went to school, went to college, and really had ambitions to play sports. My grandfather was a college football coach, and my dad was an All-American football player. And so that was really my dream growing up, to do that. And went there for a year and realized I was a pretty mediocre football player. but started taking film classes and just volunteering on, student film crews. And
This was at
that was,
BYU. This was at Brigham
yeah,
Young University. Okay.
yeah. And so just, they were both pretty time consuming, and, did not have a future in the NFL. And so just kind of started focusing on making films. And it's the first time where I thought, well, maybe I could give this a shot and see if this is something that's actually real that I could actually do with my life. And I still trying to figure that out, I think.
Well, one of the things I love that you shared with me in Vienna, when I asked about BYU's film program, I said, is it like I don't know of their film program. And you said, it's good. I liked it, but really they had equipment. And what you said to me was, I just used the equipment. We had use of the equipment. So I would take their stuff. They had cameras, they had lights, and I would get my friends, I'd write stuff for them. And they weren't even actors, I think you said. And it made me think of two things. One, I told this story to my son because I think it's really important. Everybody these days is worried about getting into, this prestigious this or that. And it's like, yeah, how many people went to USC film school that aren't doing it, or they're not really filmmaking? What I think is great about your story, it reminded me of two things. It reminded me of in Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, when he talks about Bill Gates and his friends and how they just happened to have access to a library. I think they were adjacent to some, I don't know what computer company it was, but they had access to these mainframe computers when they were in like 8th grade. So they would go there and they would get on there, and they got their 10,000 hours of, being on computers before it was really even a thing for them. So there wasn't like there was pressure professionally. They were just scratching an itch, and they got a lot of time on it. And the other thing it made me think of your story was Quentin Tarantino, how he says, yeah, my film school was the first film I made, which was terrible, which I made on like a credit card. And it was horrible. It was 2 years of my life. And then I realized it was terrible, but that was my film school. And all these other people that were going to fancy film schools never really made anything. They took a lot of classes. They had access to probably better stuff than I did, but I actually did it. And that's where I learned. That's what your story reminds me of. It sounds like you made a lot of things even when you were at BYU. Maybe am I imposing that? Did that really happen? But didn't you make like at least 4 or 5 little shorts, or more than that?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely had some great professors there for sure, but I think that the thing that was best to me about like the undergrad film experience is just what you said. Like, they had a lot of used equipment. It was equipment that kind of got inherited. It was old stuff that a studio didn't want, just kind of got donated to the school. So they had a ton of film cameras, old cool film cameras, learned to shoot on film, and just, lights and just tons of equipment. And they're at the time anyways, it was pretty free reign. You could just, go in there and take what you needed and just go out and shoot. So just spent a ton of time just going out and making stuff. And most of it's terrible, but learned a lot in the process. And yeah, probably made at least 10 different shorts, 10 or 12 shorts, maybe.
While you were there in college?
Yeah, there and after I went to school at Columbia and did study there and made shorts there as well. So I made a lot of shorts and did a lot of writing, especially because even digitally on a low budget, it's, it can be expensive or a challenge trying to get people together and make a short, but you can just sit in your, dark corner with your laptop and write a script for free. So did a lot of writing as well.
What did you learn about directing from working with non-actors? Because I got to experience your directing firsthand, and I also visited set a bunch while I was doing LaRoy and watched you with mainly Magaro and Zahn. And what I loved, and I told you this, was that you really cast the right people and then you let them bring their particular gift to the set, and you really didn't micromanage. You were very chill and very open. And we ultimately did what was written on the page because it was so well written, but it didn't feel like we had handcuffs on us, which is, I hate when I feel like I have handcuffs on me. You felt like, was that something that you always had and it's just part of your personality? Or do you think that was honed by working with non-actors and having to just go, well, I'm not going to get them to say my lines really. So I'm just going to like give them the situation and hope that they say a few of the lines. And then I'm going to have something to put together.
I think that LaRoy was definitely a different experience for me. I think I've, in the short films that I've done, some of them were a little bit bigger budgets and had professional actors in them. Some of the early ones, like I mentioned, were with friends or my siblings or whatever. So I've worked with a range of actors in those short films, but definitely by and large, the fewer resources that you have, the more of a challenge it is to find exactly what you're looking for. And so I think in the short films, I've probably been more active and more involved. And I hope not micromanaging, but certainly a lot more specific, and I'll, spend a lot more time discussing with the actors. Where by the time I got to LaRoy, I think two things were different. One, I had a bit of experience, short film experience, but I'd also written a lot of scripts and just had a much better idea what I was looking for, very specifically, which each role, each performance, each scene, really knew what I wanted, and also had the good fortune of being able to work with really terrific actors. So I knew very much the kind of actors that I wanted, and that's a big challenge, especially with like a independent film and a first-time film. You don't always have a ton of control in the process, so really fighting to get the specific actors that I knew were going to be terrific for the role, people like you and John and Steve and Megan and all the people that you mentioned. I had the great fortune of really being able to, I didn't write for anyone in particular, but I knew the kind of like actors that I wanted. I wanted actors who were great dramatic actors, but who could also do comedy, which, in my limited experience, is a pretty rare thing. I think a lot of people just assume that any great actor can also be funny. And in my experience, that's just not true. It's not like just a skill. It's not like an accent that you can learn or something like that. It takes a really special actor to be able to walk that tightrope and kind of, navigate that, those types of scenes. And so, I really had a very specific idea of the kind of actors that I wanted to work with, and got very, very lucky to be able to work with those people. And so by the time we got to set, I feel like, occasionally if something would start to drift, I could just nudge it a little bit back this way. But for the most part, I think that myself and our casting director, Kelly Roy, cast really well. And, the truth is I didn't have to do much. You guys just made me look good. I just, for the most part, tried to write a good scene and then stay out of your way.
It's humble of you to say, but you don't get that kind of cast if the writing's not great. So right back at you. I mean, literally, Steve Zahn and John Magaro aren't signing on to do this project if the script and the character is not great. The material is king. So yes, very kind of you to say to all the actors, and I'm sure that every one of them would say what I'm saying back to you. I'm constantly picking writers' brains of how they work, and all of them are different, just like actors. We all kind of have our own approach, and we have to find our own approach. I thought your way, when I started to pick your brain about LaRoy and just your process in general, you had something that I'd love for you to share with everyone about the notebook and like how things start to come to you and how you will fill a notebook.
I have kind of two notebooks, actually. I have one notebook that's just like an idea notebook. So when I don't have a script that I'm actively working on, I'll go to, so I like to get out a little bit. So I'll go to a coffee shop or something and just like, okay, before lunch, I'm going to come up with 20 ideas for movie ideas or TV ideas or whatever. And, again, 99% of them are horrible, but occasionally one isn't. And eventually, if I put in enough hours, there's a few halfway decent ideas. And then when I pick an idea, I have another notebook. So I have a notebook for that project. And for me, what I like to do is just do that same thing, which is just try to be like really loose, not try to criticize myself too much, just write down every terrible idea I have for the project, little bits of dialogue, ideas for characters, maybe a scene idea, and just try to just not judge myself, not hold myself back, but just like let it go and just come up with like, any idea I can to develop this little log line that I'll start with. And again, most of the ideas are absolutely horrible, but occasionally one of them is okay. And, if you get lucky, two of them kind of fit together and you can start to build from that. So I spend a lot of time doing that. Like that's most of the writing process for me, is just trying to generate ideas. For me personally, like if I start to narrow in on an idea, if I start to write, then I can very easily get like kind of bottleneck in my own creativity. And so I like to just like kind of let my mind roam and just like explore all terrible options, just explore all ideas, and then just take the best ones and try to build something from it. So I spend a lot of time just coming up with ideas, and I spend a lot of time trying to organize those ideas. I have like a very specific outline by the time I start to write. And so that's most of the writing process for me. And then by the time I actually sit down to write the script, I have a pretty strong idea. And of course, things change when you get into it, and you got to kind of be flexible and go where it takes you. But for the most part, I don't do a ton of drafts, because I've done so many drafts in my head or in my notebooks, or I have like whiteboards that I work on, and I just like workshopped it so much and gotten feedback on those early thoughts. And so by the time I actually get to the writing, it's usually a fairly fast process, and I don't do too many drafts.
Where are you getting that feedback? I know your wife is a writer, and I know she's like a huge resource from you, but will you also go to, close friends? Will you sometimes go to strangers? You hear like a lot of writers will say, pitch it online in Starbucks. And if their eyes glaze over, you don't have anything. Like, what is that process of putting it out there?
Yeah, I think it depends a little bit on the project. Like my wife is definitely, as you mentioned, she's a writer, and we've, we're always giving feedback on each other's stuff. So we know each other really well. I think for me, in my opinion, one of the biggest skills you can acquire as a writer, one of the hardest things to do, is to learn how to take notes on things. You just get so many notes from so many people, people in your life that you show it to, agents, managers, producers, you just get so many notes, and knowing how to navigate those notes and take those notes is like, there's people who are really good at it and people who aren't too good at it. And I think that's maybe like a little bit of an overlooked skill of the writer. I think, there's people on both sides of the spectrum, people who just take every single note, and then it's just a mess, or people who just think that their first idea is always the best idea, and they're not going to listen to anything, and you get kind of limited because they're not open to expanding that. But knowing how to like take notes and being able to identify somebody who's going to be helpful to you, like somebody who understands what you're doing, who's going to kind of like, who knows what direction you're trying to go and is going to help you get that direction, as opposed to, suggest that you try to go some other direction with it, is really hard, and something that I've really had to work at a lot. But yeah, there's like a handful of people that I know and trust that I've showed my stuff to over the years, and, continue to show my stuff to other people as well. But I usually keep it, I think it's like, I don't know, maybe I'm superstitious, but it feels like if I talk about something too soon, it just kind of disintegrates in my hand and falls apart, like, you know, that thing where that you were saying where the eyes glaze over. Like, I feel if I pitch that something too soon before it's ready and their eyes glaze over, then I just like, oh, it's a bad idea, I'm just going to throw it away. So I try to wait until I have a little bit of confidence and know, you know, at least what direction I want to go with it before I show it to people.
Yeah. Can you give any ideas, any specifics from LaRoy? Because I'm just thinking maybe this will go out as a episode on 10,000 No's when it's close to LaRoy coming out, or LaRoy is out, or it might be fun for people to hear. Like, I think you had told me you had this one idea about a hitman, and then you had like two different ideas, I think, or three. And then you at one point went, oh, maybe these would fit together. What were some of those, you know, what was some of that process with LaRoy specifically? Just because it's a cool case study for people. I know in this group, they'll go check it out when it comes out and it's available. It might be fun for them to go, oh, that's what, yeah, I think it would be fun for people to be able to reverse engineer and deconstruct it, watch this movie that they love, and then realize, oh, it didn't just pop out of his head that way. It took a lot of work to get to that ultimate vision that we see. So what were some of the original seeds, if you don't mind talking about that?
Yeah, so there's you know, just I had a notebook for that, like I said, and just was filling it. And I think if I remember correctly, like the two ideas that were kind of standing out were for John and Steve's character. So this character John's character who gets involved in this scheme, he gets this mistaken for a criminal, doesn't have a lot going on in his life, and decides like, I'm just going to play along with this, and ends up getting himself in trouble. So I had that idea for that character, and then I had a separate idea for a detective character who was kind of a bit of a wannabe cowboy, you know, very ambitious, but didn't really lack the skill or the intelligence to find the success that he was hoping for. And yeah, just at some point realize, oh, maybe these are, you know, maybe these guys work together. Like, what if I put these two guys in a scene together? Like, how would that sound? I'm like, I really, like, a big part of my process is just starting with dialogue, even if I don't exactly know what the scene is or the story is exactly, but just like writing dialogue and figuring out what the character is writing dialogue. And I feel like those two ideas, like those characters started to talk to each other in an interesting way. And it was like it became an interesting argument back and forth. And then the story kind of shaped around that sort of friction between those characters and that central argument, which is a sort of will they, won't they be friends type story.
And at that point, did you have such a specific sense of location where you wanted it? Because it's a very specific, I mean, even though it's a fictitious town, it's a very specific aesthetic to that town. It's a small town. It feels in the middle of nowhere. It feels like it's very specific. Was that when those two characters came to you, was that shortly thereafter, or did those characters come to you in a town like that?
I think Steve's character I knew existed in that world. You know, he's got a very specific look to him, and his look was a big part of the character. And so I knew I wanted to kind of put him in that backdrop. I knew I wanted a small town. I like writing stuff in small towns because I like small stories, and I like contained stories. And I guess what I mean by small is like, you know, I like, you know, you can just do so much in a small town. You know, you don't need, like, there's police officers in LaRoy, you know, we just kind of have these two pop characters that we keep revisiting. You know, if that was set in New York or Los Angeles, like, you couldn't get away with this small town police force, or there's this little bit of money that's missing that they're trying to find. And, like, you know, that amount of money doesn't mean anything in a big city. Or there's a blackmail story that ends up going on that we discover, and somebody's reputation is at stake. Like, somebody's reputation in like a small town is really important, the way in a big city, you know, it doesn't really matter. So I feel like you can do a lot with a little in a small town. So I think I just naturally am drawn towards those type, like, contained personal stories that kind of spiral out of control. And I think probably a little bit of it was practical as well. Like, I knew we weren't going to have a big budget. And so I knew, you can get like a great aesthetic in that world and setting. I really love that setting. And I knew for like just a little bit of money, we could find something that looked really cool and interesting and could visually do a lot of the work for us.
One of the things I think would be really inspiring to talk about for this group in particular, and anybody that listens to 10,000 No's, before we open it up to a Q&A, is where in your career this came from. I like the story and what I'm referring to, and you can kind of rehash it in your own words. You had a lot of other projects that were hot properties, I would say. They were things that a lot of people were talking about and wanted to do, and kind of explain to everybody that the click in your head that led to LaRoy, because I think I want these guys to hear about what I think is so special in LaRoy, and it comes across in every frame of the film, is it does feel personal. Even when you describe those characters, it feels like, many parts of you that were dealing with a business that was not really like reciprocating on the level that you felt you wanted to be reciprocated. And so you took matters into your own hands, which is kind of what these characters do. So tell them a little bit about that, where you were coming from prior to LaRoy.
Yeah, so after school, my wife and I moved to LA. I had an agent and a manager, and just kind of decided to move out there, not really for anything specific, but just to give it a go. And spent about 10 years with different projects. I had a different script. Spent a lot of time writing a lot of things, developed a lot of things for different producers. It's funny, as a writer, you just do so much free work. You'll like develop a project. I mean, I wrote an entire script one time for a producer and never got a response on it. Like, never got a thank you or like an acknowledgement that like this was received.
Amazing, isn't it?
I just wrote it like and didn't get hired to do it, but was just writing it on spec for this producer. It was a book adaptation. So spent like a lot of time developing different things for different places, and projects never got picked up, and when it actually came time to pay me, the project would fall apart. And spent a lot of time, made some short films and wrote a lot of scripts for myself. And I had this one script in particular that, almost went a few times. We would get somebody cast for it, and then we would lose that person, or we would get a little bit of financing and fall apart. And was just really, really frustrated with the process. Just couldn't get any traction, couldn't get anything going, couldn't really stay afloat. And so like I told my wife, I told Megan, like, this is just the last one. Like, I'm going to give this a try. I'm going to, give it a shot. If it doesn't work out, I just can't do this forever. It's not going anywhere. And so I really just decided with this one that it was just going to happen. Like, if I had to call my brothers and sisters up again, cast them in it, that's what we were going to do. If I was going to shoot it on my iPhone, that's what we were going to do. And I was just like, this is happening. This movie's getting made. So that's the mentality that I went in with, talking to producers, talking to people. It's just like, this is happening. This is what I want. And, I would love to have you on board, but if not, have a nice day. Like, I'm not getting distracted, because with so many of the other projects, I had that mentality before, but, then you get a producer on and they say, well, we're going to get you $10 million to make this. It's going to be great, but we're going to have to do it this way. And then you spend 3 years wasting your time and nothing ever comes from it. And it's just like, so I really was serious this time that I was gonna live or die. I was just gonna like do the thing that I wanted to do. And if it was a total mess, it was an absolute failure, that's fine, because at least I was, making something, and at least I was doing it the way that I wanted to do, instead of waiting around for permission, waiting for somebody to say yes and give me the green light to do something. And just got lucky, like found some producers that responded to that and said, okay, like that's fine. And there are definitely times along the way where they would say, it'd be a lot easier if we did this, or it'd be a lot easier if we went over here. And I would say, no, this is it. This is the movie. This is what we're making. And so I just really stuck by that, and kind of felt like I had nothing to lose, because this was my last shot and I was just going to do it. And so I think it's it was you were there. It was a tough shoot. It wasn't a glamorous experience, but I got to work with really great people. I got to work with this really terrific cast. I got to work with some really great crew. And, did I have the budget and resources that I wanted? Absolutely not. Did I have the number of shooting days that I wanted? Definitely not. But, I got to make the script that I wrote, and I got to make the thing that I wanted to make in the beginning, and got to work with the people that I wanted to work with. And so, it's not a perfect film by any means, but I feel like it's what I set out to do. And, so far the reception's been pretty good, and hopefully it'll be good enough that I get to do another one, but we'll see.
I think it will be. And yeah, you mentioned, it's funny when, because we did some Q&As over there at the festival, and you mentioned there would be shots that you wanted to get on a certain day. You'd love to come down, and you couldn't do it because there wasn't time or money or whatever. As anybody that's not you, we don't know what we didn't get. So for me as a viewer, even though I'm in it, just thinking of myself when I watch the movie, there aren't shots when I go, oh, that was cool, but I wish they had a crane shot that came down. Like that, it's just funny, like just from the creator's standpoint, because you have all of it in your head, when you watch it, you probably notice all the things you didn't get, whereas nobody else even knows what was in your head. And I can tell you from the outside, it does feel like I'm not going to say it's a perfect film, but it's pretty damn tight. I mean, it really works. It really, really works. I've seen 3 screenings of it now, public screenings, and every audience reacts. I react. I like it. And I find new things in it every time I watch it, which is cool. I'm also realizing, as you're describing your process with other producers, Junior is like the producer. And Junior's like the guy who's like, oh, don't worry. Yeah, my house is bigger than yours and I have a boat, but it's fine. We're the same. We're working this. It's like the producers that had you writing scripts that you didn't get paid, but they get this, it's like, that's kind of who he was, which is funny to think of it that way.
Yeah, I mean, 2 things. One is, I don't mean to say that I did it on my own by any stretch of the imagination. Like I mean, had a lot of help from a lot of really great people, from producers and cast and crew and everybody else. But I think, to your point about like not having the shot, like, yeah, like I'm a big same with the writing, where I like just spend a lot of time prepping and planning and thinking. Like I do the same with directing. Like I storyboard everything. I spend a lot of time, thinking and revising shots and trying to figure out what I want it to look like. And, maybe like half of that got in, probably like 40% of like the intention. Did I make it in just because of the reality of the challenge of a production? But, and I've said this before, like same way we were talking about the location, how the location, like I wanted this location in part because, we could do a lot with a little. We could just we wouldn't have to do much if we got these types of locations. If we shot in these areas, we wouldn't have to dress a lot. We wouldn't need to do a ton, and it would still look interesting. We could get a lot out of that. Like I had the same mentality with the cast, which is like, if we can just get great cast and we can just find the right people to play these roles, then yeah, at the end of the day, nobody cares if it's a handheld shot or if it's a Steadicam shot or a dolly shot that I wanted to get. Nobody cares if, this doesn't look perfect or something isn't exactly what I imagined, because at the end, we're just paying attention to these actors and their performances and what they're giving. And as long as that's working, then who cares about everything else? So that was getting the right cast was like the very first thing that I told everybody that I met with. Like, these are the types of performances that I'm looking for. These are the types of people that I want. These are the, this is what I want to do, because I just knew that, that the movie was going to succeed or fail based on this. And dealing with producers, like, that's a really big challenge, because they cast, I think like in LA, like, everybody wants to make a good movie. Of course they do, but very few people actually care about making a good project when it comes down to it. Like, they would rather do an easy project or something they're going to get paid a lot for. Like, I have a limited experience, but my experience has led me to 100% believe that there's very few people who like, when it comes down to it, actually care if something's good or not. And I was able to find people who actually did care, and I'm grateful, and that's how we got the movie made. But you can get so sidetracked with casting, because it's so easy if they could get, maybe some person who was like famous in the 90s and they still have some value, like in some overseas territory, and it's super easy to raise money with this person, but they make absolutely no sense. People who could very easily make the film or get the film made or financed, but are so inappropriate for the world. Like, I could have got this movie made much easier and got paid, a lot more, and it would have been just like a terrible movie. But like, getting the right cast to play these roles was like the absolutely number one most important thing for me, and the thing that I had to stick by in every conversation throughout the 3 years that it took to get this done. And I think very strongly that at the end of the day, if people like it, if people are enjoying it, that's the reason why, and that's the thing that I did well, is find the right people to pull that off.
All right. I hope you dug Shane. I love his spirit. He's soft-spoken, super intelligent. I hope you had a takeaway from this, more than one takeaway. And the big one for me would be, if you have something that you're looking to make, and maybe you've written scripts and you're going down a certain path where you're waiting for all these gatekeepers to put the film together, to package it with actors, maybe it's that time where you do what Shane did and you pull things into your own hands, and you just say, I'm going to do it with a smaller team, and I'm going to make the movie that I want to make with the kinds of people that I want to make it with. So I hope that was the takeaway for you. Again, I hope you go check out LaRoy, Texas, April 12th in select theaters, depending where you live, or on demand. You can stream it. If you like what you heard and you want to be a part of the 10,000 NOs Insiders Community, go to 10,000nos.com. And if you have questions about any of our other offerings, just email us, info@10,000nos.com. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We will be back with John Magaro in a week or two. All right, take care. Have a good one.